Well, thank you very much for the presentation and also for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here in the university and in Bern again. Well, English is not my first language, of course, so I apologize if I have some troubles during the reading of the work. Well, it was 1961, and 8 photographers, all from the city of Brno, exhibited their photos in São Paulo, Brazil, as part of the 20th International Salon of Photographic Art organized by the Photoclub Bandeirante. A few months later, another 10 Czechoslovak photographers took part in the 17th International Salon of Photographic Art organized by the Photoclub Buenos Aires in Argentina. This Czechoslovak participation in South America was not new, but had been going on since the end of the 1940s, with greater or lesser intensity, but always constant. The history of photography has been written through great individual names, generally men from certain European countries or the United States. Both groups, photo groups and amateur institutions have been the subject of little study and have been absent for great histories. This lecture will therefore examine the international photoclub culture from the 40s to the 60s, especially through active photoclubs in Latin America, with a focus on the southern corner, and some ideas about Czechoslovak participation in that region. Although the photographic environment of each Latin American country has its own cultural fabric, a marked cooperation and joint work was developed through networks of photoclubs and international salons with cross-participation. These instances have helped to consolidate ties between individuals and organizations, as well as to reduce distances with photographers from other parts of the world. The power imbalance in the field of photography from the 40s to the 60s accurately reflect the larger geopolitical and economical process taking place in the world. The dynamic photoclub phenomenon of these decades was based on the need to come together and build a community that transcends borders and political differences in the post-war and Cold War era. Photoclubism in the 20th century began as a phenomenon of the large urban centers, which quickly spread all over the world. In Latin America, in the second half of the 30s, a new wave of the associative movement of amateurs and professionals interested in the practice of photography as an art, which adopted the photoclub model, was established in several countries. According to the historian of Latin American photography, José Antonio Navarrete, Argentina, Brazil, Cuba, Chile, and Uruguay are among the countries where they were founded earlier. The most significant photoclubs in these countries were those founded in the capitals or in some of their most important cities, such as the Photoclub Argentino, founded in Buenos Aires in 1936, the Club Fotográfico de Chile, founded in Santiago in 1937, the Photoclub Bandeirante, founded in São Paulo in 1939, and the Photoclub Uruguayo, founded in Montevideo, also in 1939. In a few years, this type of institutions expanded massively, creating an extensive network that included photo clubs and photo circles, among other possible names, located in almost all the cities and towns, as well as inside large factories, social clubs, trade unions, and any other type of social gathering institution. The first clubs were created as heirs to the pictorialist photographic societies of the 19th century, in reaction to the massification of photographic production, thus establishing a continuity in their elitist statutes and in the folkloric nationalism present in their images. In the case of Argentina, for example, it is possible to conceive a link between the Argentinian Amateur Photographic Society and the later Photoclub Argentino, as well as in Brazil, between the Sociedade Paulista de Fotografia and the Photoclub Bandeirante. Although the photoclub phenomenon was very relevant throughout the world, it was especially important in Latin America, because due to the lack of official learning spaces at the time, they were key instances of training, exchange, and legitimation that resolved the institutional vacuum and lack of professionalization in which photography practice found itself. As self-governing entities, they filled this institutional void by stimulating the dissemination of technical and aesthetic tools for the expansion of the medium, both at the professionals and amateur level. And at this point, I want to do some comment. The amateur photographer does not work as a photographer in the commercial sense. However, this term does not evaluate the quality of his artwork, of his artistic artwork in any way, but only his formal positioning in the photographic and artistic community. Several authors, like Costan Rodríguez da Silva or Navarrete, agreed that the main characteristic of amateur photographers was that they were generally liberal professionals belonging to the growing urban middle class, with a privileged financial situation that allowed them to devote themselves to photography in their free time. The list of photoclubs were usually filled with lawyers, doctors, and engineers with cultural and artistic interests who were looking for a space of socialization and technical training. The amateurs did not try to commercialize their photographs, nor they did take up photography as a profession. Their pictures were taken only in the competitive circuit of national and international salons and awards, but at the same time, they were completely separated from the world of the visual arts. There was, and still is, a wide range of possibilities between amateur and professional photographers. As I said before, photoclubs, specifically in Latin America, brought together photographers of all traditions and practices, from sporadic amateurs to renewed commercial portraits. Photography's multiple social functions often overlap in an individual's career or coexisted in a single image. Some of the regulars at these salons were successful professional photographers who worked on assignments for magazines, newspapers, and books, but while also participating in photoclub activities. As photographic communities, Latin American photoclubs share methodologies and goals, and play a crucial role in the local photography. These social spaces serve as training centers and organize internal thematic competitions. For those who wanted to get started in photography or acquire new tools, photoclubs offered courses in aesthetics and photographic techniques and, above all, internal evaluations of their members' production. They also organize photographic excursions, internal competitions, or selecting themes, exhibitions and exchanges with other national and international photoclubs. They usually operated under a competitive logic of contents and points, based on a system of categories and hierarchies, called, in the case of the Photoclub Banderainte, and other photoclubs also in the region, for example, novissimos, juniors, and seniors. In order to move from one category to another, members had to accumulate points through contests, usually monthly or annual thematic competitions regulated by specific guidelines. However, one of the main activities of the photographic clubs was the organization of photographic salons, both closed to the members of each club and internationally open to the public. They were usually organized in categories according to the type of photography and had a very specific guidelines for participation. There were salons dedicated to portrait or landscape photography, others exclusively for unpublished photographs or black and white photographs, and from the 60s on, specifically from slides or color photography. Photographers from all over the world send their images by mail. This is a great advantage of the photographic medium. Thanks to the physical qualities of printing on paper, it is possible to get a photographic print to any point in the world quite easily and relatively cheap, unlike any other type of work. Each photograph accepted into a salon receives a stamp certificating its participation. For example, here we have this photo from Eduardo Colombo, an Argentinian photographer that participated in this salon at the Photoclub Argentino in 1945. And prizes were awarded for each category. A photo could be sent to different salons all over the world, allowing the same image to accumulate a series of stamps. These stamps belongs to Anne-Marie Henrich, who was an Argentinian photographer, and she was really successful in this system of photo clubs and salons. This recurring participation have raised the term salon photography, which was used to refer to the individual photograph that had certain characteristics that made it likely to score well in the competition system. According to Navarrete, this expression took on an ambiguous meaning because, depending on how it was used, it could serve to allude to a meritorious photograph, but also to a complacent one that adhered to proven formulas. Photoclubs thus had a threefold mission: to organize their own salons for their members, to organize international salons to attract photographs from different countries, but also to send their members' photographs to the salons of other entities, both in their own country and abroad. This participation had a strong cohesion in Latin America, whose international salons allowed the exchange of images and discourses on photographic production. They did this by forming a cohesive network that not only connected them to each other, but also integrated them into the international photographic landscape. For example, one of the first events of this kind in the Southern Cone, perhaps the very first, was the first South American International Exhibition of Artistic Photography held in Montevideo in 1939, with the participation of photoclubs from Argentina, Brazil, and Chile, most of them recently founded. We can think that this exhibition was at the origin of the strategy of connections and exchanges between Latin American photographic clubs. These interactions developed with increasing frequency in Argentina and Brazil to Mexico and Cuba. In the 40s, the major photographic clubs often officially invited other clubs from neighboring countries to participate in their salons. For example, a good example of this is the section Good Neighborhood Contributions of South American Photoclubs at the first Paulista Salon of Photographic Art, organized by the Banderante in 1942, in which two provincials photoclubs participated, the Concordia Photoclub from the province of Entre Rios and the Photoclub Rosario from Santa Fe, institutions much smaller than the Banderante. Actually, really small, these two. It is possible to see a mutual cooperation in the photoclub, in this salon also, the second Rioplatense Portrait Salon, organized at the end of the 50s between the Association of Professional Photographers of Argentina and the Association of Uruguayan Photographers, among other exhibitions. After the Second World War, however, the international photography salons experienced a worldwide boom that was consolidated in the 50s, and there were several reasons for this. After the war, technological development impacted photography, producing smaller and more accessible cameras, as well as papers and chemicals that were faster and easier to use. Photography was fully industrialized, and in the case of Latin America, many local companies, such as the FIFA company in Argentina, emerged, making supplies even more accessible. So, in the 50s and 60s, it was possible to have a home lab in your bathroom that was easy to set up and take down. In addition, an increase in leisure time, the development of mass cultural industries, and a marked dynamism in communications, for example, through the circulation of magazines specialized in photography, create the ideal scenario for the international photo salons to develop with such vitality. Among the photography clubs founded in Latin America, the Photocine Club Banderante from São Paulo has obtained from the beginning the widest and most systematic national and international projection, with international salons with a great participation and prestige. Although some women, such as Anne-Marie Henrich, that I already mentioned in Argentina, participate regularly in the photo clubs of their countries, the list of names refer mostly to men. Photo clubs function on explicitly non-profit grounds and outside of any art market, becoming an ideal space for middle-aged men to unleash their creativity through competition. Each international, regional, or national salon published a booklet, like this, for example, with details of the event, including the names of all the participating photographers, the titles of their photos, and the prizes awarded. The pages of these small publications put all the photographs on an equal footing, without distinguishing between professional photographers with experience or new amateurs. Sometimes these booklets contains a very few photos, but they were always very few compared to the number of photos that were shown. In this way, recognizing the photographs that participated in these events is complicated and can only be done by references to the titles. Based on some research carried out in recent years on Latin American photography, such as Navarrete and Meister, but also at the global level by Tiefenthaler, and for the Czechoslovak case by Battle, it is possible to state some general guidelines about the type of photographs that were shown in these spaces. In its beginnings, the photographic production frame in the photoclubs continued with the pictorialist tendencies of photography at the end of the 19th century. In these images, photographics records the picturesque motifs of the rural and urban landscapes prevailed, as well as portraits staged in sentimental atmospheres. Photographic pictorialism was characterized by the use of specific processes, such as bromoil, gum bichromatate, or carbon print, among others, with a strong emphasis on the quality of the final artifact. A progressive assimilation of the modern aesthetics began in the late 40s, bearing the unmistakable attributes of the mid-century photography, such as relatively high contrast, predominantly dark tonality, grayness, and pronounced sharpness of focus. Thus, the international salons of the 50s and 60s were characterized by an artistic eclecticism, based on the coexistence of remnants of pictorialism and modernizing positions, without taking into consideration the inevitable frictions between them. In general, a traditional image will prevail, and the obsession with technique and the quality over the content will continue in the dynamic of the photoclubs through their history and in all the countries that were part of it. Nevertheless, it seems that the Latin American entity that went farthest in an ambitious project of artistic modernization was the Photoclub Bandeirantes from Brazil. Its modern artistic orientation was consolidated in the early 50s under the direction of Eduardo Salvatore, with photographers such as Gertrudes Atschul, Gerardo de Barros, Gaspar Gasparini, José Oichica Filho, to name just a few. It was called the Escola Paulista. According to Navarrete, the Escola Paulista fits perfectly into the art historical discourse because it meets the requirements of the Western artistic tradition to identify common proposals and characteristics in the work of a group of artists in a specific cultural geographical moment and space. Its production was an exception within the photoclub dynamics of the time. It brought together different types of photographs with certain common guidelines, works resulting from technical experimentation, such as the photomontages, the photograms, and others linked to formal constructivism research, geographic abstraction, or the surrealist universe, within the diverse contributions of the Photoclub Bandeirantes to modern Latin American photography. The Brazilian salons of the Escola Paulista, in which the Brno photographers participated, were attended by well-known figures in the history of visual arts in the South American continent, such as Gerardo de Barros, as well as by amateurs who participated sporadically. This is an important difference from the international salons of Western Europe, where, with few exceptions, the great names of local artistic photography were overlooked. Looking broadly at all the photography from the region that was part of these salons during the 40s to the 60s, it is possible to find a cross-section of post-war photography composed of multiple regional perspectives and idiosyncratic visual styles that resist the application of an unified periodization or a single stylistic hierarchy. Another activity to which many photoclubs devoted themselves was the publication of bulletins or magazines, among which the Van der Eindhoven publications was the one of most important at the regional level. This task was accompanied by some specialized photographic magazines, among which the Correo Fotográfico Sudamericano, published in Argentina between 1921 and 1959, stands out. Both publications played a nodal role at the regional level in the exchange and dissemination of information, images and authors' names through mutual cooperation and shared participation. The exchange between photoclubs was one of the neuralgic aces of these magazines, since they dedicate pages of sections to the dissemination of the activities, competitions, salons, and exhibitions of the photoclubs in their continents and abroad. The Correo Fotográfico Sudamericano had a section called Newsletter of Latin American Artistic Photographic Activities, or in Spanish, Noticiario de las Actividades Artísticos Culturales Fotográficas Latinoamericanas, which was systemized from mid-1944. In this section, the activities of the photoclubs in Argentina and the rest of the continent, the calls for national and international salons in different countries, and the results of the contest were disseminated. It also included news about the circulation of photoclubs members from Latin American countries, Europe, and the United States through clubs in the region. Throughout the decades, Latin America photoclubs sought to strengthen ties among themselves and with other institutions in the region, with the goal of revitalizing and professionalizing Latin American photography. The result of the intense joint activity throughout the 50s was the Declaration of Rio de Janeiro, signed by in that Brazilian city in 1962, with the aim of creating the Latin American Confederation of Artistic Photography, an international organization that will bring together all the Latin American photography federations. According to the note published in the Argentinian newspaper Noticioso FIFA, the meeting was attended by Maurice van der Weyer, the president of the FIAP, I will explain now what is this, the president of the Brazilian Photography and Cinema Association, the authorities of the Argentinian Photography Association, and the president of the Uruguayan Photography Club. The document also states that the Mexican Federation of Photography and the Photographic Club of Guatemala had also expressed interest in joining. It seems that this initiative never came to fruition, but the intention to create such a transnational organization is a remarkable fact that shows the close relationship that existed at that time between the photographic institutions of Latin America and their members that has been little studied until now. But moving to the international scene, from the mutual cooperation that cemented the international network of photoclubs, the International Federation of Photographic Art was founded in 1950 in Switzerland by the amateur photographer Maurice van der Weyer. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing correctly this surname, but well, you can see it there. Yeah. His work as the official doctor for the Belgian national soccer team took him to many countries, where he met with local photographers. Van der Weyer noticed certain similarities between the organization of international sporting events and photography salons, which led him to organize this institution based on the rules of sports federations. According to Tiefenthaler, who studied this organization for her doctoral thesis, FAAP created a non-profit, egalitarian, and open system, I'm quoting, of image production and circulation among photoclubs that aspired to align with the idealism of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. FIAP succeeded in mobilizing a transnational and heterogeneous community of photographers by appealing to shared idealisms that transcended geopolitical and professional boundaries during the Cold War, a time of profound political and socioeconomic crisis. To join the FIAP, it was necessary to have an organization that sought to represent the photographers of the territory, like a photographic club. Based on a humanistic idealism, the FIAP welcomed all interested participants, regardless of their country of origin, professional affiliation, or level of education. The organization was not managed or controlled to those directly connected to any kind of political power or authority. There were no political interests or direct economic benefits at the stake in FIAP, and the institution was not under direct pressure from governments with conflicts agendas, because also United States or the URSS was not part of this institution. At its inception, the Federation had 17 affiliated countries, including Brazil and Cuba. By 1965, FIAP united national associations of photoclubs in 55 countries in Western and Eastern Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The latter represented by 10 countries ranging from Mexico to the Southern Cone, with Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, and Central America, with Guatemala and Nicaragua, among others. In fact, Van den Baer had a significant presence in South America. He held a solo exhibition at the Photoclub Bandeirante in 1951, which was described as eclectic in the magazine of this institution, and which embodied the spirit of photographic exhibition of the time, to show the best that the photographer was capable of, from landscapes to portraits, with the aim of demonstrating the capacity and versatility of photographic performance through diverse applications. Van den Baer was a close acquaintance of Eduardo Salvatore, the founder and president of the Bandeirante, and visited São Paulo and the Bandeirante on regular basis during the 50s. He returned to Brazil in 1956 for the celebration of the club's Bandeirante 17th anniversary, and again in 1958 when he also visited the Photoclub Uruguayo in Montevideo. And this photo that was reproduced in the magazine in a whole page is in Czechoslovakia. As already mentioned, there were many international salons in Latin America held annually by different types of photoclubs, from the largest and most famous of those of small towns or social clubs. All of them received entries from different countries, and a jury selected the photos that will participate. The rest of the photos were returning to their authors, and they could resubmit them to other contests. Among all the countries that participated in the salons in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and other Latin American countries, there was Czechoslovakia, of which I would like to highlight the participation of two photographers from Brno, Karel Otto Hrubý and Adolf Rossi. Their names caught my attention because they appear in several brochures of the salons I'm interested in. I was also able to focus on them during my last weeks here in Brno, because in recent years the art historian and curator Lucas Bartle has published books on their figures and works, shedding light on their careers and allowing me to being this cross-reading study with the region in which I work. The cases of Hrubý and Rossi are interesting because they are two different examples of the type of photographers who participate in the salons at the same time. Hrubý was a professional photojournalist, a professor of photography at various institutions, and a prominent figure in Moravian photography at the time. At the other end, Rossi was an amateur photographer, an electronical engineer by profession, who had no ties to any local photographic institution in Brno or Czechoslovakia, who did some sporadic photographic works for occasional events, as detailed in the catalogue of the solo exhibition he held in Brno in 1957. However, both began to sending their photographs to international salons in the late of the 40s, despite the restrictions and controls that began in 1948 in all areas of life in Czechoslovakia. In fact, according to the list of exhibitions I was able to consult, both participated for the first time in South American salons in 1949, Rossi in Santiago de Chile and Ruby in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Throughout the 50s and good part of the 60s, they continued to participate in photographic clubs in Latin America. For example, Rossi photographs were admitted to almost all the annual salons of the Photoclub Banderanti throughout the 50s, the golden age of this photoclub and of the Escola Paulista. In these salons, he won a large number of medals and diplomas, but he also participated in other institutions in Brazil, such as the salons of the Fluminense Society of Photography of Niterói or the Association of Professional Photographers of Porto Alegre, among many others. This is not surprising, since, according to his notes, Rossi apparently participated in more than 900 salons around the world between 1947 and 1967, yes, 20 years, which might sound exaggerated, but judging by the number of stamps he kept, it could be real. His name is included in the FIAP list of the most prolific exhibitors for 1956, having 40 or more acceptances. That is the name of the list. And the same institution gave him the title of Artist FAP in 1970, when he had already retired from the competitions of the salons. Well, here there is this list published in the brochure of the exhibition that he did here in 1957, where we can only see 47, 48, 49, and 50, but there are several pages with all the lists of the exhibitions in photoclubs that he was participating. Due to the difficulties mentioned earlier, it's not easy to identify the exact photographs that Ruby and Rossi sent to Latin America salons. However, by comparing the titles of the photographs published in the catalogs with their photographs included in recent books and the stamps that Rossi kept neatly, it is possible to locate some of them. For example, Rossi's photographs entitled Dancing Snowflakes at the International Salon of the Photoclub Bandeirante in 1952. And here we can see all the stamps of the salons that this photography was participating. This is published in the book Photograph Adolf Rossi, published in 2019. And here we can see that this same photograph participated in other 3 photoclubs, salons in Latin America, with Uruguay, Mexico, and Necochea, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Or Ruby's photograph entitled Winter Landscape at the International Salon of the same institution, the Bandeirante, in 1966, for which he received a bronze medal. This task becomes even more complicated if we take into account that photographers often changed the titles of their photos or choose some very generic ones that are repeated in their archives. The archive of Adolf Rossi, with his photographs, the catalogs of the salons, and the stamps of all the exhibitions all over the world, represent a treasure of this period. In addition, the detailed list of the exhibitions in which he participated give us a very good idea of the large number of international salons that took place simultaneously around the world. With all this material, which is not usually found in many archives, Rossi's also allow us to pinpoint specific photographs, shedding light on the images that secured his place in these competitions. And these are some of the photographs that were participating in salons in Latin America. We can appreciate the apolitical nature of his work. Rossi's photographs sent to these salons have the aesthetic of the early 20th century, even pictorialism. Produced in the classic silver bromide process, the topics treated are usually idyllic rural landscapes, portraits, views from city streets, architecture, detailed images of nature, dancers, religious images, and scenes of the simplest everyday life, with a treatment closer to the classical painting than to the modern photography languages. Indeed, the neutrality of the photoclubs was the ideal space for such photographs, without any political commitment. In the case of Cruby, it's more difficult to identify the exact photographs with which he participated in the Latin American competitions. We know that the bulk of his production during these decades revolved around the socialist realism, and after 1953, the so-called photography of everyday life. Cruby was a landscape and documentary photographer with a meticulous work of light, dedicated to documenting the folklore and traditions of the rural environment, with a special predilection for South Moravia and Slovakia. His images of people working in factories, quarries, or in the countryside are unprecedented, has a really high quality, and are almost kind of ode to human labor, very much in keeping with social realism. We must remember that all photographs sent abroad were controlled, and photographs in the spirit of socialist realism would certainly be preferred by the authorities. However, for Battle, his work, the work of Cruby, stood out among the output of the average photographers of the time, and his images can often be understood ambivalently. After 1948, the communist regime introduced strict censorship and sophisticated controls over the visual arts. It is surprising that submissions to the international photography salons were not completely affected by the censorship. While correspondence with foreign countries was controlled, Cruby, Rossi, and other photographers continued to communicate with salons around the world, including hostile countries, such as West Germany, the United Kingdom, or even the United States. According to Battle, the customs office had to mark each photo before sending it, and all photos had to be returned to the author after the exhibition at the salon, because citizens could not earn money with their work, and if the correct number of copies were not returned, there was suspicion of illegal sale of work. Because customs officials regularly inspect the content of all the shipments, photographers have to be very selective about which photographs to submit for inspection. This might explain the type of pictures chosen for the competition, but not the good performance of both photographers. Their success was due to the fact that Rossi's bucolic photos and Cruby documentaries of human activity were exactly the type of photos that regularly triumphed in these salons, fulfilling all the requirements perimeters. The photography of everyday life and even some aspects of the socialist realism had coincidentally visual points in common with the political, disinterested, and humanistic photoclub aesthetics, where, in general, there was no room for experimentation, at least not during the 50s, with the exception of the Bandeirante that we already saw. The apolitical position that the FAAP claimed for its international organization was also reflected in the type of photographs accepted in these competitions. And it was this that shaped the non-commentant, even naive photographic style that these institutions began to be accused in the 70s. How photographers from Czechoslovakia managed to participate in these competitions despite the censorship and control, or, as Battle says, why the communist regime left this channel to the West open, has not been explained. Contacts with the West was cut off, and the Western press was unavailable, and traveling abroad for an exhibition was not easy. But apparently, there were still forms of exchange that could be used. In fact, Rossi participated in 58 salons in 1952, peaking at 95 in 1955, although considering that he might not have been accepted in absolutely all of those to which he sent his photos. So probably he mailed photos to many more. In 1959, 6 Czechoslovak photographers, including Cruby and Rossi, participated in the international salon of the Photoclub Argentina. And they were many more during the 60s. Well, these are some images of the Czechoslovak participation in 47, 49, 60, and, for example, 66. The city of origin of all of the photographers was not always indicated in the catalogs, but when it was, it can be seen that the most of the authors were from Brno, and almost none from Prague, with very little participation from other cities. Perhaps the control was more relaxed in Brno. Maybe there were more photographers willing to take part in this contest. Probably their main motivation was to be able to show their work outside the established borders and boundaries, to feel somehow included in an international community where all countries play the fiction of being on equal footing. At the same time, the catalogs that each successful participant received were one of the few opportunities to explore the world of authors from other parts of the world. When they received their photos back, the Photoclub sent them the catalog with their name included in the catalog and all the information of the event. Photoclub culture remained virtually invisible outside the community of photographers themselves. In fact, Navarrete calls Latin American photoclubs the forgotten network of Latin American photoclubism. Nevertheless, this work of collaboration between different countries, which is not so common in Latin America, represents an important chapter of the history of Latin American photography and its images and its exhibitions, which has only recently begun to be explored. This same is true of the international salons, which allowed images to combine geographically and politically impossible encounters. In fact, the multiple aesthetics and cultural context in which these salons took place resist the unified periodization of canonical photographic history, whose narrative is constructing around certain individual cases. Studying these international events in depth is essential not only to recover and rediscover the history, but also to problematize the official photographic narrative of the 20th century and to look at them from a different perspective. Thank you.